Now, what is the crucial part of Shankaracharya's statement? It's not only Shankaracharya, I mean his interpretation of the Upanishads and so on. Of course, he said, Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya. He said, pause. But as long as you eat and drink and have your emotions, you cannot say you are Brahman. You are still in Maya. While you are in Maya, Maya is a reality. When you are outside it, then it is Maya. Right? Now, you can say simply, this is all Maya, but it doesn't work. I will say it is all Maya. If somebody calls me a fool, then I get angry. So where is the Maya? It's not there. So, while it is a high statement, it's not easy to grasp this except through sadhana, to finding out. Not by simply chanting, I am Brahman, nobody becomes Brahman. It only builds up one's ego, and one thinks, oh, I am Brahman. It's better to say I am a human being. One thing. Second thing is, you are asking me why that Maya came. Buddha said this in a very beautiful way. He said, if you go into a garden and somebody shoots an arrow at you, what is the first, you're suffering, there is pain, right? Sorrow, pain. What is the first thing you should do? Remove the arrow and get rid of the pain? Or lie there with the arrow in your chest and figure out how did it come, where did it come from? You'll probably die of gangrene before you find the solution. So the first step is to move out of the sorrow. And how to move out of the sorrow is only when you figure out that desire is the root cause of all sorrow. Wait, not finished. And and if you move out of the sorrow and figure out the essence, then you will probably be able to know the answer of why this Maya has come and why we are trying to come out of it. And this question is very similar to a child asking their father and mother, do you love me very much? Yes, we love you very much. Then if you love me so much, why didn't you invite me for your wedding? You understand what I'm trying to say? We are so small and puny that we probably cannot find out why it happened, but it's a fact that it has happened. So can we deal with it as it is? And then maybe when you find out, you'll know why. Unfortunately, most people who have found out have not been able to express why. Okay, point one. Second, the same Shankaracharya, who said Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya, wrote all the commentaries on the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras, which are so tough to read. Achato Brahma Jignasa, this is how it begins. The same Shankara said, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Mudamate. You fool, not you, sorry. Fool, chant the name of Govinda. Samprapte sannihite kale, your death is approaching. Nahi rakshati dukran karane. All these grammatical constructions are not going to help. Chant the name of Govinda. This also we should keep in mind. And it is the same Shankaracharya who wrote the Vedantic discussions and the Upanishadic interpretations and said Brahma Satyam Jagat Mithya and so on, is also the same Shankaracharya, apart from Bhaja Govindam, who wrote this beautiful celebration known as the Saundarya Lahari, where he said, Bhavani Tvam Dase Mahi Vitara Drishtim Sakaruna. Same Shankaracharya. So, if you are following Shankara, then you should follow the whole thing. You can't only divide it and follow only one. If you follow one also, it is okay, but you must admit that the other fellow might be following the other side. Then we are okay. I think so. Sir, he had some question. He was immediately taking the mic even before Mr. Reddy finished.
Thank you so much for
What's your name?
Badri Khanal. I am from Nepal.
Badrinath.
Badrinath. So thank you for your
And
presence.
where are you from? Badrinath?
Nepal.
Nepal.
Nepal. So my question is a little bit of related to technology,
Technology.
and then your physical presence right in front of us. I'm just trying to compare your physical presence here with so many online resources like YouTube. I call myself a little bit of a spiritual seeker. I'm trying to seek the Vedantic knowledge and all those stuffs. But unlike in the past where we had like some scare of like Gurukul, and we used to go to, people used to go to in front of the gurus and spend years and years seeking the direct knowledge, interventions, and supervision from the guru. So we are very unfortunate that we have to be happy with whatever we have from YouTubes and Googles and
YouTube.
so I'm just trying, because in the last an hour or so, I was so impressed with your teachings. It's not only because the content of the teaching, but your presence itself was so powerful. I felt that way, right? So is it the presence of the guru or the swamis that is important, or the knowledge of YouTubes? Because I'm in dilemma, because there are so many YouTube
I know,
discourses and videos,
I
and that
agree.
is the only thing that I am left with, and I can't stop listening to those resources because I'm so addicted, because that is how I want to spend my days and hours. So please tell me what is my choice, because I can't
What is
fly.
What's your what?
What is my choice? What are my options now? Because I can't.
Choice.
Right. So I don't know any gurus, any swamis. I can't fly to India to meet you and, get your teachings. So, thank you.
Clarified that there is not much choice for you.
So, let me tell you this. You're right. There is so many things on YouTube. Problem is, I think it's better to not have any guru than to have a wrong guru. Because then it will take many years for you to come out and then start fresh again. So my suggestion personal is, you said that you feel something in my presence, that's okay. My suggestion is that if your search for the truth, which I think you are very sincere, I'm not denying that, is very serious, then the right kind of guidance, I think, will come to you in some way. You have to be sincere. Don't fall into traps. Especially avoid teachings which have to be paid for. And don't judge a teacher by his appearance. You said, I appear nice. Or I may be. But I may be a fraud. We don't know. So, go through all the teachings, all the books, and then think carefully before you decide. And then, while personal understanding and guidance is important, I agree with you, it is also important that my aspiration for spiritual progress should be deep. Okay. Having said that, I must also say that if you are seeking a spiritual teacher, you should get rid of the conventional ideas that we have, because that prejudice may prevent us from seeing a real teacher sometimes. I'm going to tell you a story. Sorry, we need to stop at 12, but this is a short story. I'll finish fast. There was a rich man in the Middle East. And when he was very young, he had great spiritual aspirations. But he was very poor. And being very poor, he also had the desire to become rich. So somewhere along the line, his spiritual aspirations got neglected and he became a rich man when he grew up. Depends on what you want, right? And he became a big man. When he reached the age of 50 or 55, he said to himself, I thought I would be happy by becoming rich. But money doesn't seem to be buying happiness for me. There is something more. Perhaps this little flame of spiritual interest which is in me, it's still there like a spark. Maybe I should ignite it and move towards it. So he decided to distribute all his things to his sons and daughters. And took a little money to build a small hut in the oasis. In those countries, water is there only in the oasis, not like us. We have plenty of water. In the oasis. And there he started to live alone and meditate, giving up. But then he also carried all the books he had collected on the subject. He made a library inside. Having been a rich man for many years, he had so many servants, he had even forgotten how to make a cup of tea. He has to live alone, so he went to the village. After searching, he found a cook. So he took the cook and he went. So the cook would cook for him and he would study and he would meditate. 7 years passed. At the end of 7 years, it occurred to him that this which I am seeking requires a teacher. Unexplored territory is not easy. I might stumble and fall. So he went out, start searching for a teacher. He went to many caves and hermits, not satisfied. Don't know what he was looking for, not satisfied. Then he saw a very vulnerable looking man coming with a green turban. It could be green or it could be saffron, doesn't matter. Turban. And rosaries on the neck. And a big beard, so big that you could tuck it into the collar. Vulnerable looking guy. So he went to him with folded hands and said, "Sir, you seem to be a great yogi. Can you become my guru?" The guy said, "How do you know that I am a great yogi?" Huh? He said, "I don't know, I think you are a great yogi. You look like that." I said, "Okay. Looks are deceptive, but let me tell you something. You are a very sincere fellow, I think. I would be happy to take you on as a disciple. But there is a big problem. I don't do anything without taking permission from my teacher, my guru. And he has disappeared somewhere. I can't find him. 7 years I've been searching for him. I couldn't find him. If I find him, then I will ask him and then I will take you as my disciple." So this guy said, "So are you searching alone?" I said, "Yeah, I'm searching alone." He said, "I can also help you if you give me a description. So please describe, because I can help you." So he said, "Well, he's a short man. His upper body is always bare. He wears only a loincloth. He has a towel on his right shoulder all the time. But he's a very good cook." So this fellow said, "Oh God, this looks like a description of my cook." So he said, "Can you come with me to my cottage?" He said, "Yeah, okay." So he took him there. As they entered, the kitchen door opened and the cook came out with a towel on his shoulder. Immediately, this great man prostrated before him and said, "Oh, Master, where have you been? 7 years, I am looking for you. Where have you been?" He said, "I was with this fellow." He said, "But he's still looking for a guru." He said, "It took me 7 years to get it into his head that he needs a teacher. Okay? Now that he has found you, you please help him because I have other work to do," and walked out of the place. You know what I mean? So there are no such criterion. You don't know how they are, where they come from. And somewhere deep down I have a feeling that somebody in Nepal is waiting for you. I'll shake your hands, but something will come from Nepal, I think. with the blessings of Pashupatinath. Huh? Let's see. My blessings.
Today happens to be Krishnastami, Krishna Janmashtami, and there's a lot of pujas going on all over.
Yeah.
Now, I've been asked many times, is puja really necessary? It's totally religious. I am not religious, I am spiritual, so don't need to do all those kinds of papavitra, pavitro and all that. Is that really essential? That's my question.
The question is very simple. I am a spiritually minded person. Is it necessary for me to do the ritual of actual puja? This is the question, precisely. If you really think you are spiritual and you see the presence of the divine everywhere, you probably don't have to do any puja. However, how many people are there like that? We can only count them in the fingers of our hand, perhaps even not. So, for most people, it's good to be engaged in doing puja, doing seva, you see what happens is, like I said before, we are human beings who live through our senses. So, if you don't let the senses enjoy things like worship, they will try to enjoy something else. This is better than that. Okay. The other is, it also has a certain rhythm generated for the mind, which is usually rhythmless. So it gets into a certain movement which brings the mind together into the deity that you worship. If you say, I can see the deity in my heart, there is no need. But people can't. It's not so easy to do that. Okay. The other thing is, when you do puja, you also chant mantras. Right? Now, the mantras have a built-in vibration, even if you don't know the meaning. Sanskrit is such a language that it has a built-in rhythm to it, so that when you chant it, the mind and the breath both. You see, you can't chant without breathing. The mind and the breath both get into a certain rhythm, order. In fact, one of the mantras is Ridham Vadishyami. So, and the mantras are not chanted haphazard. When you do puja, Panditji is here, he was here now. Ask him, there are some rhythms which are built into the mantras. So if you chant it accordingly, even if you don't know the meaning, they will make your mind's waves come to a certain way so that they can go inside. For instance, there are many mantras, Purnamada Purnamidam, there is Asato Masatgamaya, which is not even a prayer, it simply means, may I go from the unreal to the real. It's not even a prayer, it's an affirmation. Then there are those beautiful mantras from the Aitreya, Taittiriya. When you chant it, even if you simply chant, there is the Gayatri mantra, there is Sahana Bhavatu. See, when you chant a mantra, apart from the meaning of the mantra, there is a notation to it. If somebody chants, suppose I am chanting Shanti mantra, but the pujari who does it will chant it properly. So you learn how to chant it, and then the pranayam, the mind, everything works in unison. And then after you have reached that stage, you can be free of it. But it's good to, like if I chant, Shanno mitra shammarunaha shanno bhavatvaryama shanna indro brihaspati shanno vishnurukrama namo brahmane namaste vayu tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami Ridham vadishyami satyam vadishyami tanmamavatu tadbhaktaram avatu mam avatu bhaktaram. Om Shanti. You may not know the meaning, you may, somebody may not, but the rhythm of this mantra, the sound, the rhythm vadishyami works into your system, and there is something coming out of that. So this is the reason why all this has been prescribed. Well, having said that, I must also say that while you do puja, it's important that the mind has to be clean and clear. There's no question about that. Even when you build a temple and install an image, there is a process called the prana pratishta, right? Otherwise it's just a stone idol. When the sculptor makes it, he probably sits on the head and takes the eye out with his chip, with his hammer. But then once it's made and it is put up there, still it's not become holy. Then prana pratishta is done. Who does the prana pratishta? A qualified person who knows what to do. What does he do? Put in a nutshell, he clears his heart, does avahana, invites that particular deity into his heart, fills it with energy, prana, and then invites him to go into that image. And then it becomes fit for worship. Prana pratishta is over. So I usually ask, who is important, that or the person who does prana pratishta? So if you can see that as antaryami all the time, then you probably don't have to. But how many people? So it's better to. That's my discussion on this matter. It's not a what you call a final answer. What is it? Thank you very much.